Welcome to Cyber JA's monthly Cyber JA Cyber Conversations, and I'm Richie Perry, your host. And we're always looking forward to spending time with you guys as we seek to build and add value to the cybersecurity community. Let me just add one of our members to the session. All right, so there you go, Jonathan. All right, welcome, Jonathan. All right, so as I was saying earlier, guys, we're always looking forward to having these amazing conversations as we explore various topics and issues affecting the cybersecurity landscape, and more so the takeaways that we can actually use to um, help organizations, help our people to better appreciate and also to protect the environments in which we operate. Now, according to Microsoft, today's organizations need a security, or rather a new security model. As you all know that there are many models and frameworks. But according to Microsoft, we need a new security model that is more effectively adapts to the complexity of the modern environment, one that embraces the hybrid workplace and protect people, devices, apps, and data wherever they are located. So for today's monthly cyber conversation, we'll be responding to the question zero trust, is it a solution or a strategy? And in light of this, we'll be addressing a number of important questions to bring out that overall topic and question in of itself. We'll be looking at what do we mean by zero trust, and where in the CIA triad does this fall? Why zero trust? Can zero trust be truly achieved while meeting business objectives? What are the challenges to implementing zero trust and how to overcome these challenges? And lastly, what are the elements of the zero trust architecture? And for sure, there will be a number of other discussion points in between these questions. And to shed light and provide insights and perspectives, we have industry experts, Chris Omar Carter, and we also have Jonathan Fisher. So before we actually delve into those questions, um, I always like to go back to the basics. So let me share just a few background snippets leading up to the concepts of zero trust. So the concept of zero trust security emerged in response to the limitations of the traditional network security models. And a brief history started out with the shifting landscape in the 1980s to 2000s. As networks grew and the internet emerged, the concept of network security gained importance. So firewalls became a key tool to control traffic, and then we jumped on to 2004, that the Jericho Forum, and this industry group recognized traditional perimeter-based security wasn't enough. Pointed out the blurred lines between internal and external risks. Then we go on to 2009. That's the birth of trust. So John Kindervag coined the term zero trust in a 2009 report, and this concept challenged the prevailing trust-based approach to networks. And finally, in 2010, going forward, then zero trust evolved into what it is today as cloud adoption grew and the workforce more mobile. The zero trust model adapted and the focus shifted to data and user identity as core security elements, not just location. So concept like zero trust network access emerged around this time. So guys, before we delve into the questions, what were your thoughts when you first heard about zero trust? I'm not certain if you were thinking like zero trust, what is this all about? I'd love to hear your thoughts before we even start looking at any of those questions. Chris probably want to start first,
Yeah,
then
no, I think
Jonathan.
just
You got all that.
just like you said, zero trust is it's a concept that came out of the Jericho Forum with John Kindervag back in the early 2000s, and I think it really encapsulates traditional security practices but also evolves it, right? I think back in the day, you know, we had this concept of the castle and moat paradigm where you have a hard exterior and a soft, crunchy interior. So once, you know, the paradigm was let's beef up our perimeter security and then keep the bad guys out, but let's just keep every trust, have a kind of unlimited trust inside. Once you're inside the network, you have unfettered access to applications, any devices that are sitting on the network. Zero trust takes that concept and say, no, let's start looking at it, which is back in the day, it was actually a futuristic way of looking at the concept of zero trust. Why? Because one of the things I just said to someone a couple of days ago is when you have people or people with devices anywhere around the world accessing your network to interact with data that's sitting on an application, a lot of things can go wrong along that path. And therefore, the concept of zero trust says, okay, we're going to have limited access, not going to have ubiquitous limited access. Identity is going to be sort of like the new perimeter, not to throw in a lot of tropes, but that's really what it is because your perimeter has become it's more porous. It's not as rigid as it was 10, 15 years ago. Therefore, zero trust as a construct redefines that traditional paradigm by prioritizing continuous verification, having strict access, and therefore, when you take that approach, you mitigate the risk and you enhance your resilience in a very dynamic and sometimes treacherous digital landscape. So, Jonathan, I don't know if you have anything else to add. A bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, I mean, you said it pretty well. And Richie, I like the fact that you went through the history of zero trust because a lot of people think zero trust is something that's rather new, right? It's what's been getting the attention lately. But when you look at it, it started way back in the early 2000s, right? It really kind of picked up a little steam in the 2010s as you were talking. That's 2 decades ago that people have been talking about this, and only now are businesses and government realizing the need for the principles behind that we can't just allow everyone to access. Chris, I definitely like that example you did with the moat and the castle, right? That's kind of the common way that most organizations build their network security is like, hey, let's try to build the outer wall so that way we can keep people out. But once someone gets in, they have all access to everything. I've heard of zero trust. When you look at those analogies, that's more like a hotel. And we'll go with like one of these upscale New York type of hotels where you have one of those security guards in the front, right? That you got to show them. Maybe you need your room key to get into a side door. But once you're in there, you only have limited access. I only have access to the lobby. I only have access to maybe the gym, the laundry room if they have one, and to my room. And that's about it, right? I can't go just wandering around, right? I have a key card that allows me to get into any type of, or only certain type of room. And that's kind of what zero trust is, right? You are only giving the access to individuals and to users what they need access to, right? And you block everything out for them. So
Yeah, that's a very good point. And you have also made something very important, the fact that zero trust existed a very long time. In the fact that it was not really coined or looked upon the way it is being looked upon today. In the fact that have a number of pillars or elements that actually build this model into what we could maybe classify as standard approach to security. So I would say, as I've rightly said, this is not something that is new, but it is now structured that can also be applied in a more layered approach, right? So thinking about zero trust, a solution or a strategy, just to get that clear, I mean, from your perspective, what's your feedback in terms of, was this something you would normally hear persons saying that, oh, zero trust is possibly something that you could purchase from off the shelf? or is it a strategy? I mean, what has been your take?
I'd say zero trust is a strategy that combines several things to meet business objectives. It's not one thing. I mean, zero trust could be, you have let's say you have AWS cloud, so you have a cloud access security broker, but you also have individuals, or you have clients, customers, partners, employees accessing an S3 bucket or accessing assets within the cloud. Just to go back to Jonathan's example, is they need to have access only to the resources that they need to get their work done. What zero trust does is, if we go back to Jonathan's analogy with the hotel card, it takes it to with the hotel and the card that allows you to go in your room. Zero trust even goes a step further and say, okay, you want to have access to the, that little box you have inside of the hotel room where you can store all your, your passport, your credit card. Zero trust goes to that level where it says,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
you've knocked down the security guard, you've stolen my key card, and you're inside my room. But do you now have access to my credit card? No, you don't. So you're limiting the access, because at every point of entry, the assumption is that you are an untrusted entity, and in order for you to have access, you have to prove who you say you are. That's where multi-factor authentication comes in. But then you have microsegmentation. Maybe you have several of those little lock boxes in your room, and okay, so one is for mom, one is for dad, one is for daughter, one is for son. Right? Each person have access to only the things that they should have access to, when they should have access to it, right? For the right reasons. One of the things that zero trust espouses is the concept of the Kipling method, right? Who, what, where, why, when, and how. So who's accessing it? Where are they accessing it from? How are they accessing it with? How are they accessing it? Why are they accessing it? When are they accessing it? So all these different, the concept, it's actually, so I don't want to go off on a tangent, but to answer your question, I would say it's a strategy that combines several different solutions.
Yeah, and
Okay,
regardless of
great.
what the sales people
Uh,
think, it is a strategy, right? They might try to sell their solutions as a zero trust solution, but as Chris says, it takes in a lot, right? I'm sure there's companies out there that provide enough solutions to try to help create a zero trust, but that's all it is. It's them selling it. It's up to the organization to actually implement those and configure it correctly.
sure.
Absolutely.
Um, One of the things I recognize that as it relates to zero trust is the fact that there are many layers of authorization, authentication, verification, all of this process actually taking place. And just talking from experience, I recognize that as soon as someone needs authorization or access rights to get to the resources that they require, then you have a lot of, I would say, internal politics or internal challenges. For example, rights may be given to X, and because you're at a certain level, oh, he's fine. I mean, he can do whatever he needs because he's a CEO or he's an executive. Um, what are some of those challenges do you think that will interfere with implementation of zero trust and ways in which we be able to overcome these challenges? Because the thing is that if this is going to be a problem in organizations in terms of preventing them from actually operating efficiently as possible, then there are going to be a lot of drawbacks from actually not wanting to enforce or implement this security model.
Jonathan, do you want to go, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I'll go first this time. I mean, the biggest challenge is just the user access to, I'd say, doing the reviews often to make sure that people have the right access, right? It's going to come down to the individuals who are implementing it to kind of block out that politics, as you said, Richa, and to really focus that, does that person actually need the access? It doesn't matter if they're a manager in the finance organizations, but if they don't need that access, they don't need to have it, right? Regardless if the CEO or CFO or someone is trying to pressure the implementers to give it to them, they have to stand firm to understand. um, and really, it's going to come down to the education for the entire organization of what zero trust is, the just the understanding that you cannot have all access to everything just because you want it, and then ensuring that those controls are set. Again, the conducting those reviews often. All right, it's not just something that should just be done annually or semi-annually, or maybe not even quarterly, depending on the size of the organization and the amount of users that have access. Right, it could be annoying, but try to spread it out to ensure that all users who have access are being reviewed to ensure that they have the appropriate access, and if not, that the proper measures are taken to remove that access, and maybe educate them on that. Right? There going to be a lot of phone calls that is going to be kind of difficult to take at times with a lot of angry customers or employees on this that's going to be on the other side. Sure, but if an organization truly wants to have or near to zero trust as they can, they really have to educate and ensure that those basic controls are being set and followed.
100% agree. I think most companies, they have elements of zero trust. Back to your earlier question, was is it a strategy or a bunch of solutions that you kind of combine? Most companies have elements of zero trust. The challenge I think a lot of companies face is the scope of implementation. So as you're shifting right to more of a zero trust strategy, that requires that layer eight that you're talking about, the politics, the personalities, the personal agendas. Those are always going to be a part of your environment, regardless of your zero trust or all trust. You're going to have that. So it's very important to to kind of have a standard that everyone follows. One of the things I love about what John Kindervag, I think he's working for Luminor, one company. I can't forget the name of the company, but one of the things that he's always said is, the first thing you have to do when you're going down a zero trust journey is you have to identify the protect surface. Once you've identified the protect surface, so again, using the hotel analogy, let's say the protect surface is those little security boxes in the room. That's your right now. What you have to do is, so that's step one. Identify or kind of identify the protect service. The next step, surface. The next step is to say, what is the transaction flow? So who should be coming into the hotel through the lobby in the elevator, right, to the room, right? That's the second step. The next step is, I think he talked about was you have to architect a zero trust, have a zero trust architecture. And then you create policies. And to Jonathan's last point, you monitor and maintain. So just because you're the CEO and you started out as an analyst, it doesn't mean that you have access going all the way back to when you were an analyst. Why? Because you're monitoring and maintaining that environment. So whether it's an RBAC solution or you have an IAM solution that protects user access or protects the your assets by identify the identities that are coming in, but that's really how you kind of you're never going to get around it, but that's how you kind of surmount that challenge around the layer 8 challenges. Just have one standard, and then meticulously socialize, educate, communicate to your audience or to your user group or your user base so that they understand the importance of zero trust, but also other aspects of it that are germane to the work that they're doing on a daily basis.
Sure. And in light of that, I mean, can zero trust be truly achieved while meeting business objectives based on the nature and the structure of zero trust in of itself?
I would say yes. Wait, so I would rephrase that question and say zero trust is here to protect the business, right? You think about one of the things, I think it's become a trope now because I've said it so many times. Uh, we just finished a document, and one of the things I said we needed to put in the document was zero trust is here to protect four R's, right? If you've listened to me talk, these things always come up. It's the revenue, that's number one. The second R is regulation. If you work in wherever you work, you're going to be beholden to some type of regulation. The next is your resilience. How quickly are you able to recover? If someone were to break in your hotel room and break that little box open, how quickly are you able to recover your documents or get a similar set of documents, right, and start working around, right, that problem? And the fourth R is your reputation. All I have to do is mention Target around 2013, 2014, and you know what that means, right? They have a mark on their back. So that's what zero trust really does. It protects the 4R when it comes to business imperatives.
Sure. Know the fact that we have actually established that zero trust is not a solution, but rather it's a strategy. Um, from your perspective, I mean, what would be maybe the best approach or the to actually, for example, if you were given that task to develop a zero trust strategy, I mean, what would be, for example, your approach to a small, medium sized, or large organization? What are some of those guidelines or pointers that you would actually take to say advise someone from your perspective? 'Cause I think that is what it actually boils down to. It's always good to say zero trust is XYZ and this is what it is for. But at the end of the day, is walking away knowing that zero trust as a strategy is actually functional within my organization and it is also helping the organization to be in line with its overall objectives. That is the core thing that I really want to get to. How do I actually develop an effective strategy? What would be that approach?
Well, I think it's kind of what Chris alluded to earlier is trying to figure out what that base layer protect is, right? Because after that, you understand what is the most critical pieces of information for your organization to protect. And then it's kind of doing that data mapping backflow, right? Figure out from when you come into that network, how you get to that protect layer, right? That data that's most secure that you're trying to keep, and try to find different gateways, different ways to where you can put in those access request areas, the blocks, and also really one of the biggest ways is going back and doing vulnerability tests on that pathway to make sure that there is no open gates that you've missed, or open ports, or any thing that could be exploited and cause. I mean, that's in a real quick nutshell. That's kind of the basic, to me, a basic strategy to do is figure out what you want to protect, and then the best pathway forward, and ensure that that's really the only pathways with enough appropriate security checks for that organization to ensure that people are always having to authenticate in, or that there is some type of check to ensure that they have that access.
Agreed, 100%.
Exactly. I mean, it has to be a layered approach. I mean, depending on your organization, depending on the scope, nature of the organization, understanding the organization and culture, who it is that you're actually dealing with as people. And I recognize in many cases, people are the most difficult or maybe most challenging element as it relates to actually implementation of most, I mean, cybersecurity initiatives. So once you're able to break down that wall, then things are more easily implemented as it relates to strategies or approaches. So now, when we think about zero trust, I mean, where in the CIA triad does this actually falls? Because at the end of the day, we are talking about protecting the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of data. Regardless of any framework that you are implementing, it boils back down to the CIA triad. So how does this actually aligns um, with the CIA triad?
I think it aligns very well with the CIA triad because the CIA triad is all about data, right? And data has three basic states. Data is either at rest, it's in process, or it's in flight, right? So you either have the data stored in a database or on your laptop, hard drive somewhere, or you're making changes to it, or you're sending it to someone, right? That's basically, those are the only three states. And what does the CIA triad says, okay, should you have access to that data, right? Who confidentiality? Who should have access to the data? When should they have access to the data, right? Integrity. Now, you know, depending if I should not, if all three of us work in the same organization, I should not know what your salary is, right? Taking that same going along that same thread is I should not be able to go in the database and add a couple zeros before the decimal point to my salary, right? Revenue, you're impacting revenue, right? So you have to maintain the integrity of the data. However, if I want to go into my company's database and access my tax returns because it's April 15th and on April 14th, I live in the United States, I should have access to it. It should be available to me. Now you take that example and you could wrap it around the whole concept of zero trust, right? Right? Should Chris be accessing the database to see his social security number? Yes. Okay, Chris, prove to me that you say who you are. How do you do that? First, you have an identity. You have an identity provider. All the stuff with Active Directory, maybe you have a token or you have some form of saying, yep, not only do I say I am who I am, but I have something to prove it. And you go along we only have a minute left, so I'll make it short. I think they are aligned and they complement each other.
Sure. And just one last important question that has to do with is zero trust for all types of organization, or is it only for specific classification of organization, or does it even make sense to adapt zero trust without actually looking at the
Each
contents
company
of the
has some
organization?
type of important data. I'm sorry if I stepped on you, but yeah, each company has some type of important data that they need to protect. In zero trust, even the small organizations can build, the basic layer. The thing I like is that zero trust has different layering, that here's some basic stuff to do, here's some more intermediate, and here's some advanced stuff. And even the basic, startups can look at what the basic information is and be able to at least implement we'll say basic security measures and security controls that help at least start forming the basics and that foundation of zero trust. And as they grow, they're able to then continue to build up on that.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I know we're 1 minute over, but it's important. I think zero trust, the concept is solid. The name is a problem. I think over time, what will happen is zero trust will become between all three of us on this call, right? Or to society as a whole. Why? Because you have AI coming in, a lot of deep fakes. So, for example, I make a phone call to you. How do you know it's me? I think the social implications of the name zero trust, I don't want to get into it, but I think it's something worth noting that the concept, I think it's going to become a part of how we do business, how we interact with each other, right? My son is at school. I send him a call to say, hey, my buddy Tony is going to pick you up because I can't pick you up. He needs to know that I sent that message to him. But perhaps we should change the name to like conditional trust or something verification. But I think zero trust is here to stay. But as we evolve as human beings and security professionals, we're gonna have to do something with the name because it's not tenable.
That's a very I mean, intriguing, captivating point to actually end on that you could actually delve into. I mean, for another conversation. But at the end of the day, guys, we now recognize that zero trust is not a off-the-shelf solution, but it's actually a layered approach. It's actually a strategy that has to be implemented at various layers, various levels, and it has to be strategic in the way how it is actually enforced within organizations. So, I mean, that's it from us here on CyberJ, and I mean, see you in our next monthly cyber conversation. So please share this with your network as we seek to strengthen our cyber community. So enjoy your rest of the day, guys.
Thank you. Have a good day
Bye.
too.
Take care.
Cheers.